The flight attendant made it her mission to ruin our trip. I've flown hundreds of times in my life, but I've never experienced anything like this. As soon as Josh and I stepped onto the international flight, I could feel it, a sort of tension. That went beyond the usual pre-flight nerves. Not the cramped space anxiety or the worry about delayed flights. This was something more specific, more personal. Something that felt directed at us. "Elizabeth, you're reading too much into it," Josh whispered, offering a reassuring squeeze of my hand as we moved down the aisle. He always tried to calm me, but I wasn't imagining it. The flight attendant, standing near the front, radiated something unpleasant. Her posture was rigid, her lips a thin, tight line. She wasn't smiling at anyone. Not passengers, not colleagues, not even the captain. It was as if she had been personally inconvenienced by the very concept of this flight. I noticed it right away. The subtle way she scanned passengers, the way her eyes lingered on certain people, and the small curl of her lips at moments that didn't call for humor. As I looked closer, I noticed the name tag on her uniform said Monica. She was short, probably mid-50s, with perfectly styled, shoulder-length blonde hair and judgmental eyes that looked like they were staring straight into your soul. Josh leaned closer, whispering, "Don't worry about her. Maybe she's just having a bad day." I shook my head. "No, Josh, this is different." My stomach twisted as I said it, a sense of dread creeping over me that I couldn't shake. We made it to our row near the middle of the plane, stowing our carry-ons in the overhead bins. I tried to do it calmly, but Monica swooped in like a hawk. Her glare fixed on my bag, she pointed a single accusing finger. "That bag? It goes under the seat. Overhead bins are not for whatever that is," she said, her tone sharp and cutting. I blinked. Actually, no," she snapped, cutting me off before I could finish. "It goes under the seat." "It's really not that complicated." Josh gave me a look that said let it go, but I felt a flash of anger. She wasn't enforcing a rule. She was making it personal. The takeoff announcements began, and every instruction Monica gave felt loaded with disdain. She was the flight attendant stationed towards the middle of the plane, coincidentally right in front of us. When she demonstrated the seatbelt, she leaned closer than necessary to the passengers across the aisle from us, giving each person a pointed look that seemed to say, "I know you're going to mess this up." I tried to relax, listening to the engine hum as we taxied down the runway. Josh whispered, "Just breathe, Liz. It's only for a couple hours." But my attention kept drifting back to Monica. She moved with precision, her steps too measured, her hands too stiff. Each glance she threw our way was like a needle pricking at my nerves. And every time I looked at her, I felt the weight of her judgment, as if we had already failed some invisible test. By the time the seatbelt sign clicked off at cruising altitude, I was already on edge. The flight felt claustrophobic, the air charged with tension, and Monica's presence loomed over us like a storm cloud, and I realized this wasn't just a rude flight attendant. This was a villain in human form, and we were trapped in a flying metal tube with her. The first hour of flight passed with tense silence and occasional jabs from Monica. She had an uncanny ability to appear whenever we thought we were safe, checking seatbelts with exaggerated suspicion, tapping the overhead lights as if we had personally caused a malfunction, or giving us glances sharp enough to cut glass during beverage service. The nightmare intensified. Josh and I waited patiently as the cart creaked toward our row. But Monica seemed to detect our calmness like a predator sensing weakness. "What do you want?" she snapped, cutting through the murmur of the cabin before we could even speak. "Coffee, please," Josh said, voice calm but polite. Her lips twitched into a smirk. "Coffee, that's all? You're lucky we even have decaf left. And do not touch the sugar packets until I say so." I wanted to laugh out loud. The absurdity of it was almost comical, but the way she delivered it made it impossible. It wasn't helpful instructions or strict adherence to safety. It was an old lady on the least deserved power trip ever. As the flight went on, her actions grew somehow more aggressive. She would lean over passengers, not to assist, but to intimidate. She tapped trays with a sharp edge, nearly spilling drinks, hovered unnecessarily close to people who were just trying to eat, and spoke as though every request was an offense. At one point, Josh and I dared to exchange a quiet laugh at a funny video. The moment Monica saw it, her expression hardened. She glared at us with the kind of intensity that could make grown adults shrink in their seats. "You too," she said, voice low and dangerous. "Keep that up and I'll move you to seats at the very back. It's empty back there. Plenty of room for undesirable behavior." My stomach dropped. Did she just threaten us? Josh leaned closer, whispering, "Liz, don't react." "She wants a reaction. Document it and we'll report her when we land." But even as he said it, my hands were shaking. It was one thing to be rude, another to make passengers feel unsafe in the air. I could see other people around us exchanging worried glances, whispering among themselves, and giving her sideways looks. Some avoided her gaze entirely, as though acknowledging her presence would trigger a disaster. The next incident came when she collected trash. She leaned over our tray, her eyes narrowing in a way that made my chest tighten. "You're lucky. I don't make you sit in the back," she said, smirking. "I can put you anywhere I want." I froze, a threat disguised as casual words. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's unprofessional. You cannot move passengers for personal reasons." Her smile widened like she had won some invisible contest. "Professional is boring. I prefer efficient, and you two are inefficient." I clenched my fists under the table, a mix of fear and fury coursing through me. Josh gave my hand a quiet squeeze of silent support. But it was impossible to ignore how utterly powerless we felt by now. The cabin had become a pressure cooker. Monica patrolled the aisles like a storm, her every move designed to provoke, test, and intimidate. And with every step she took toward us, I felt the conflict rising. This wasn't going to be a simple complaint to airline management after landing. This was personal. As I sat there, heart pounding, I realized something crucial. The rest of the flight would not just be uncomfortable. It would be a battle. And the outcome would depend entirely on how cleverly Josh and I could navigate Monica's calculated hostility. The flight was barely an hour in when I realized Monica's mission wasn't just rudeness, it was psychological warfare. She moved through the cabin like a predator circling prey, her eyes scanning, her lips twitching in what could only be described as malevolent satisfaction. Every small sound we made seemed magnified in her presence. Josh tried to keep me calm. "Liz, just ignore her. Focus on your book. We'll survive this." I tried. I really did. I pulled out a novel, flipping the pages with forced concentration. But every time I glanced up, she was there leaning over a passenger 2 rows ahead, tapping a soda can with her finger as if testing their composure. Her presence was suffocating, oppressive, and relentless. When she reached our row again, I could feel the air tighten. "You two," she said, voice sharp as a scalpel. "Make sure your seatbelts are where I can see them. I know how you young people are." Josh leaned toward me, murmuring, "Don't engage. Just let it go. Pretend she's invisible." I clenched my fists under the tray, heart pounding. Pretending she was invisible felt impossible. Her mere presence made the cabin feel like a trap, a metal cage designed for control and intimidation. By now, passengers around us were beginning to murmur. Monica's antics weren't subtle, they were disruptive. She knocked over a full drink behind us while maneuvering around a row, muttering about passengers being careless. The man from a few rows back frowned at her and she turned, glaring at him like he had personally offended her. "You there," she said, pointing at him with a finger that trembled with barely restrained irritation. "Watch your belongings. Don't think I won't notice." The man raised his hands in a defensive shrug, looking helpless. I felt a flash of sympathy and fear. Monica wasn't just rude. She was a threat to anyone who annoyed her in the slightest. I whispered to Josh, "We have to do something. We can't just sit here while she keeps escalating." Josh looked around, scanning the cabin. "Liz, if we make a move, it has to be smart, She escalate if she senses we're trying to get under her skin. We spent the next hour quietly observing, trying to figure out her patterns. Monica had favorites, the passengers she ignored, and targets, the ones who she could belittle or intimidate with a single glare. Unfortunately, we were a part of the target group when she came by with snacks. She stopped at our row and leaned in too close. Her breath smelled faintly of peppermint, but it wasn't comforting, it was sharp, almost predatory. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Just a snack, please," Josh said calmly. Then she did something that shocked even Josh. She leaned over and adjusted my seatbelt, not because it was unfastened, but as if asserting dominance. Her fingers lingered too long, her eyes fixed on mine, and I felt an uncomfortable mix of fear and fury as she grabbed the tail end and yanked until it was uncomfortably tight. "Comfortable?" she asked, her tone mocking. "No," I said quietly, my voice trembling slightly. "Not when you're treating people this way." Her smirk widened as she casually moved on, as if she didn't just do something completely insane. The next 2 hours or so passed in a tense blur. Monica patrolled the aisles with increasing intensity. She would stop at random rows, ask questions, just to get under passengers' skin, and then turn on her heel with a satisfaction that made my skin crawl. Every interaction was a test of patience, endurance, and nerve. Josh and I developed a silent communication system: eye rolls, slight head shakes, subtle nods. We documented her behavior quietly on our phones, taking notes about the times she was unnecessarily aggressive, the threats she made, and the general chaos she caused, but nothing seemed to curb her behavior. If anything, it emboldened her. She thrived on the control she had over the cabin, and the more passengers flinched under her gaze, the stronger she seemed to become. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we hit the halfway point in the flight. Monica's attention shifted momentarily, giving me a small window to breathe, but deep down, I knew this was far from over. She wasn't done, and I realized something terrifying. This battle wouldn't be over when the plane landed. It would be won or lost in how cleverly we could outmaneuver her before the fight reached its peak. By now, Monica's behavior had moved beyond mere rudeness. She was actively creating obstacles for passengers. She delayed drink service for some, blatantly ignored requests from others, and approached anyone who dared to look relaxed with a sharp, accusing glare. Josh leaned close to me again, whispering, "Liz, we need to do something. This can't keep going." I nodded, my mind racing. What could we do? Calling the captain seemed drastic, and I was fairly certain Monica would spin it to make us look like the problem. So, we decided on subtle tactics, documenting everything, staying calm, and avoiding giving her a reason to escalate further. That strategy worked. That is until she started targeting other passengers. A mother trying to calm her wriggling child received a cold stare and a reprimand for letting the kid touch the tray table. An elderly man was scolded for not keeping his reading glasses folded neatly. The tension in the cabin was becoming unbearable. I whispered to Josh, "Look at this. She's doing it to everyone now. We're not imagining it." He nodded grimly. "It's like she's trying to assert total control. We have to be smart. We can't just come at her all accusatory." But before we could settle into our careful observation, Monica came back to our row. She leaned over and tapped my arm lightly, but enough to make me flinch. "You too?" she said, eyes glittering. "I can see it in your eyes. I know you're plotting something. What is it?" Josh's jaw tightened. "We're just trying to have a peaceful flight," he said quietly. Her smirk widened. "Peaceful is boring. You should know by now that this isn't about peace. It's about order. And some of us, unfortunately, have to enforce it." Her words were vague but threatening. I could feel the tension building in the cabin as other passengers glanced nervously at her, unsure if she might punish them next. Josh tried asking what we were doing wrong, but to no avail. She kept going on about order, whatever that's supposed to mean. I could tell even Josh's patience was starting to crumble. That's when I realized we couldn't wait for the flight to end. If Monica's behavior escalated any further, someone would get hurt or humiliated. Before we landed, we started to quietly plan. We would remain calm, document her actions, and wait for the right moment to alert the captain or file a formal complaint. We whispered strategies back and forth, trying to anticipate her moves while also avoiding provocation, and yet, every time I thought we had a moment of peace, Monica would reappear. Her timing was uncanny, her instincts unnerving. She seemed to sense the exact second our patience wavered, and she used it to her advantage as the plane continued to cruise at 35,000 feet. I realized that this was a fight that demanded every ounce of composure I could muster, because when we finally landed, I knew one thing for certain. Monica's reign of terror was going to meet a reckoning. By the time we were 3 hours from our destination, the cabin had transformed into a pressure cooker. Monica had gone from intimidating and rude to relentless. Every movement she made was calculated, every word carefully chosen to intimidate. And every glance seemed aimed at establishing dominance over the entire plane. Josh leaned close to me, whispering, "Liz, we can't let this continue. We need to do something." I nodded, heart pounding. We had been documenting her actions for nearly the entire flight, noting every insult, every unnecessary instruction, every passive-aggressive threat. But simply documenting it wasn't enough. We needed to act strategically without giving her an excuse to escalate even further. We began observing her more closely, analyzing patterns. Monica favored certain passengers, meaning she ignored them completely, while she deliberately harassing others, mostly those who looked slightly nervous, younger passengers, or anyone who dared to question her authority. Josh and I were clearly in the target zone, which made our strategic thinking even more crucial. The breaking point came unexpectedly. A young woman in the row ahead of us accidentally dropped her phone, and Monica swooped down immediately. "Snatching it up like a predator, careless," Monica said, voice sharp and mocking. "Some of you really shouldn't be allowed to fly." She then took the woman's phone and swiped down to make sure it was on airplane mode, which thankfully it was. The woman apologized quickly, her cheeks flushing. But Monica was unsatisfied. Passengers around her flinched. Whispers rippled through the cabin. Josh's jaw tightened. "That's it. Now's our chance," he whispered to May. Took a deep breath, standing slowly to draw Monica's attention without aggression. "Excuse me," I said clearly, my voice firm but calm. "We need to speak with you about how you're talking to people. It's creating a hostile and unsafe environment for all passengers on this flight." Her eyes flicked toward me, narrowing. "Oh, and who are you to judge me? Are you the pilot of this flight?" "I'm a passenger," I said evenly. "So are dozens of others. People are uncomfortable because of your words and actions, not because of delays, turbulence, or the usual stresses of flying. We are prepared to report you if you keep treating us like this." Josh stepped up beside me, showing our phone screens with careful notes and timestamps. "Every incident is recorded. We're asking you to conduct yourself professionally. The choice is yours." For a moment, Monica's confident mask cracked. Her eyes darted around the cabin, noticing the quiet support of other passengers. Some were watching, some whispering to each other. A few were recording the interaction, and some subtly nodding in agreement with us. The atmosphere had shifted. She could feel it. Everyone was against her. "You think you can tell me how to do my job?" she hissed, though the sharpness in her voice had weakened. "No," I said evenly, refusing to rise to her bait. "We are asking you to follow policies and treat passengers with respect. That's not dictating, it's accountability." Her gaze flickered from us to the other passengers. A flash of frustration crossed her face, and for the first time I saw hesitation. She took a small step back, adjusting her stance, as if she was reassessing the situation. "I will conduct myself appropriately," she said finally, voice clipped. Her shoulders were tight and her posture still rigid, clearly lying through her teeth. Josh and I exchanged a glance, relief mixed with cautious vigilance. This wasn't over. We had shifted the balance, but we still had to ensure she didn't revert once she regained composure. The next 30 minutes were tense but manageable. Monica patrolled the cabin, still professional on the surface, but her previous flair for intimidation had softened, or at least was put on hold. Every passenger could sense it. and the energy in the cabin changed. People exhaled slowly, adjusted their posture, and quietly relaxed just a little. Josh whispered to me, "We need to remain aware until landing. Let's make sure we record the rest of the flight for the report. No lapses." I nodded. We kept careful watch, noting every movement, every word, and every passenger reaction. Monica followed protocol, but her personal attacks had lessened. She had learned, at least temporarily, that some actions had consequences. When we finally began our descent, I felt a cautious sense of relief. The storm was coming to an end, but the battle had been real. I realized with a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction that this confrontation had been as much psychological as it was tactical. The plane's wheels touched down with a soft jolt, and the cabin erupted into quiet murmurs. Passengers unbuckled, stretching and gathering belongings. Monica remained at the back of the plane, her posture professional, but the previous menace was gone. She helped passengers gather their things efficiently, but without the personal edge she had wielded all flight. Josh and I waited for the crowd to thin slightly before approaching the cockpit. The captain was standing outside the door and greeted us with a friendly smile, his expression professional but attentive. "We need to report a flight attendant's conduct," I began, voice calm. "We have a detailed record of behavior that was intimidating and unprofessional. This is not a complaint made in haste, it's a documented account." Josh handed over our phones, showing notes, timestamps, and recordings. Every incident was accounted for: the threats, the unnecessary intimidation, and the general disruption to passengers' comfort. The captain reviewed our documentation with growing concern. "I appreciate your patience and diligence," he said gravely. "Behavior like this is unacceptable. You handled it remarkably well, especially staying calm under pressure. We will conduct a thorough investigation." Relief washed over me. All that tension, all that fear and frustration suddenly seemed worth it. We had been trapped, powerless, midair with someone deliberately trying to make our trip miserable, and yet we had regained control through strategy, composure, and careful documentation. Josh laughed softly, shaking his head. "I can't believe we survived Monica's personal vendetta. I never thought a flight could feel like that." I laughed with him, despite still feeling the tension in my shoulders. "I can't believe she thought she could get away with it." As we collected our luggage, I glanced back at the plane, imagining Monica walking down the aisle, seeing every passenger confident that we had won this battle. The psychological weight she wielded had been stripped away by calm, rational resistance. We walked away from the plane together, leaving behind the chaos and intimidation. Monica's reign of terror had ended. The storm in the cabin had passed, and for the first time in hours, I felt free.